This lesson covers using editors and IDEs. The topics include: what is an IDE? What is the difference between an editor and an IDE? Why would you want to use one or the other? What are some popular cross-platform Windows, Mac, and Linux editors? What are some popular IDEs? And what do you need for this course? First of all, IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. The difference between an IDE and an editor is that an editor is like a word processor which only works with plain text files. An editor is designed to allow you to quickly and easily edit text files such as PHP scripts or HTML. The IDE, on the other hand, not only contains an editor, but it would have advanced PHP development features such as debugging, pop-up suggestion lists, profiling, and other features. Why would you want to use one or the other? The editor is useful for one-time scripts, HTML pages, or fairly simple projects. An IDE, on the other hand, is designed for large-scale programming projects where you would have more than a dozen interrelated files. What are some popular cross-platform editors? These would include Genie, Bluefish, and gedit. Having a look at a couple of these, we move now to the documentation page for Genie. So as you can see, Genie is a standard text editor. It's built using a standard C language library called GTK Toolkit. You are seeing an example of Genie right now on the screen. Some of the features include line numbers, which are on the left, the ability to open up and close loops, the ability to recognize various commands, such as PHP commands. So for example, if I were to type in a PHP command, such as file get content, you'll notice that it adds a pop-up list automatically to give me suggestions. If I then proceed and select one of these, it then further gives me suggestions as to the syntax for this particular command. Not all editors are sensitive to the particular language. This happens to be a characteristic of Genie. Looking at some other popular cross-platform editors, we've got another one called Bluefish, extremely popular, operates on all of the major platforms. And finally, there's one called gedit. Gedit is a general-purpose editor which was designed by the project GNU or GNU. It's also part of what's called the GNOME desktop, which is included in a number of Linux distributions, for example. However, the gedit text editor is available on Windows and Mac as well. What are some popular Windows editors? These would include Notepad, which is included with Windows. Notepad is perfectly sufficient for developing small-scale PHP and HTML scripts. There's another version called Notepad+, which is an enhanced version of Notepad somewhat similar to Genie. And finally, there's a shareware version called Edit+. To have a look at the web page for Notepad+, so you'll notice some of the different features here. First of all, it's free and open source, designed for Windows. It includes line numbering and also the ability to open and close blocks of code, much like Genie. What are some popular Mac editors? These would include TextEdit, which is included with the Mac, and there's another project called Coda, which is an advanced editor. However, it is not free. Now to look at the Coda webpage. Again, this is panic.com/Coda. And what are some popular Linux editors? Primarily the open source cross-platform editors mentioned before, including Genie, Bluefish, and gedit. What about the IDEs? The IDEs include the PHP Eclipse project. Looking at the web page for that, Eclipse itself is a very popular underlying IDE on which various layers are added. In this case, the PHP Eclipse project takes the basic Eclipse editor and adds PHP-specific features such as suggestions, pop-up boxes, the ability to view blocks, for example, inside an if statement, and that sort of thing. We also have something called XenStudio. XenStudio, however, is not free of charge. Moving over to the XenStudio website. Again, you can see it's an IDE developed specifically for PHP. Xen is the company which is responsible for maintaining the PHP language. To have a quick view of this, let's take a look at a Linux machine which is running XenStudio. Here we can see the welcome screen, the opening screen for XenStudio. On the left-hand side, there's an Explorer bar which allows you to view files within various projects. This facilitates the organization of your code. You'll notice in this case, there are dozens and dozens of files which are interrelated. The other thing that XenStudio allows you to do is what is called debugging. So for example, if we want to take this particular project and debug it, we would select the appropriate URL for this particular file. XenStudio will then allow us to switch perspective. We are now looking at the code as it rolls out. On the right-hand side, we can see the variables. We can also step into the code one line at a time, and on the code screen, we can see exactly where we are. You can also see the variables being populated one at a time, and you can get further information on what is in these variables. You are allowed to move to the end of the run. You can also step over and step return, which avoids having to go into subsidiary files. There's also the project called NetBeans. NetBeans is very similar to XenStudio, however, it is open source. Looking now at the NetBeans main website. And finally, what do you need for this course? For this course, all you need is an editor. As mentioned earlier, at a minimum, you could have an editor such as TextEdit on the Mac or Notepad in Windows, which will be perfectly sufficient for the purposes of this course. This concludes our discussion of using editors and IDEs.